Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I really want to talk about something that I think is very important, something that a lot of first-time founders don't understand, and probably a lot of things that people don't recognize when they first go out and build out an application. And that is, when do you know your app is no longer viable, or how do you know when the time is to stop working on a certain project? And I mostly bring this up because there are a lot of people that I speak with daily who come up with these ideas and they go out, build them, or in some cases, there's people that I met years ago and they built them, but then they keep stringing it along because it's their baby. Obviously it means a lot to them, but they aren't willing to let go of the project, even though it's costing them a ton of money. And it's one of those things where unless you're directly involved behind the scenes of what it means to market it, what it means to finance the project, what it means to hire the right person to do your project, like all these different things, like you don't really recognize how difficult it is to let go of a project, especially if you believe it's going to be your main money source. I think the internet does a really good job of making it seem glamorous to just go out, build something, and hope people that find it. And that's great. That's part of the picture. The next part is getting it out there, and then the next part after that is adoption, ensuring people that want to use your app, or the people you think that want to use your app, are willing to use your app. And that's the part where I know a lot of people don't know what the right answer is. They come in and they say, I just want to keep it going alive. What else can I do? What features can I do? What more marketing can I do? What more, like, I am of the belief that there is always a market for something, but if you've done your due diligence and it's just not the right product, then you need to be willing to let that project go. And so I'm going to give you a really personal example of this. About a little over a year ago, I created a new app called TrueStar. The website is still live, but the app no longer is. In fact, I deprecated it and removed it from the app stores a couple of months ago. But when I created this application, the entire idea was that I didn't like the way that companies like Airbnb and Vrbo were using comments to give me information based off of their stay. I didn't like how people were leaving their reviews for some of these short-term stays. I would show up to a lot of Airbnbs and I would read through the comments. I checked it out, 4 or 5 stars all around, wonderful things. And I get there and it was horrible. And then I would go back looking through the reviews to see if I went wrong, maybe I missed something. And I see these very low star reviews that were very much true to what was actually happening in my Airbnb. And that didn't happen just once, that happened multiple times. In fact, there was one time where we had to leave completely last second and find and book another place within just a couple of minutes because it was just an awful location to stay at. So I thought it would be a really good idea to have a non-biased location where people could go leave the review, and then, a user could verify that against what they found on a platform like Airbnb or Vrbo. In theory, it made sense. In fact, when I built this, I had done my research. It's not like I had just built it out just in the hopes that people would adopt it. I built it having gone to places like Reddit and finding people who had the exact same complaint, that there's way too many fake reviews and way too many fake 5 stars because it goes both ways. And they wanted a place where they could go and have an unfiltered, more unbiased location. I reached out to several users across several weeks trying to get any information on whether or not they would use it, how they would use it. And even after launch, we even went back to those same users and others to get them to come to the platform. And at first it was good. At first there was a good amount of people who were willing to use it, or at least voice that they would be willing to use it. And the launch had a very slow adoption. So much so that everybody that we had put on our list that was willing to use it had just completely ghosted us. And I never was able to find out why. And I kept going back trying to see if I can get any information. And no one really gave us any additional information as to why they wouldn't use it. Well, that was problem number 1. Problem number 2, as we continued to reach out to more people, people just weren't interested. They simply weren't interested in the product. We would tell them why we thought it was a good feature. We would read their story a lot. There's these awesome subreddits where people would voice such frustration about a particular stay at an Airbnb, but they either felt like they couldn't include it in the review or they accidentally forgot to include it in the review. And so I wanted to give them that opportunity to continue to voice that, because let's say the Airbnb space itself was worth 5 stars, but the host just did all these things that were bad, and you forgot about it, or you just didn't want to make the person feel bad or whatever. Now you have that second opportunity to go ahead and give your unbiased review. So we kept going at it. We had responses every so often, but more often than not, nobody wanted to use the application. Like nobody was willing to adopt it. After a few months of just kind of grinding, trying to build out features alongside it, trying to get information from users to see how they would use it, it kind of just dwindled, and I've moved into working on something else. I left the app up in the hopes that maybe at some point somebody from the past that I reached out to or somebody new would find it and they would reach out to me and they would give me additional information as to how we might be able to make the application better. And nothing really happened for like ever. So I left it alone for about 6, almost 7 months. And then at about the beginning of 2026, I was taking a good hard look at all the apps that I was working on, all the things that I was accomplishing, client work, etc. And I just said, listen, like this project itself isn't really worth it. I haven't worked on it in months anyways. So I made the choice to go ahead and just abandon it. And it's no longer available on the App Store. I think if you have it currently downloaded, you can still use it, but you can't download it brand new on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. And so it leads me to the belief that you need to understand when is the right time to leave. Now, I think in my perspective, from like my story, it was a lot easier for me to leave because I wasn't so focused on this being my one app, like the one thing that I knew was going to work. And I was willing to go ahead and say, I'm done with it. I'll move on. Maybe in the future it'll make sense. Maybe somebody else will figure out how to do it, and then maybe I can give them my opinions as to how to help them with it. But for now, it just wasn't the app for me. It wasn't the app for me to continue to build, and apparently wasn't the app that people wanted to use. So, and I'm okay with that because as an entrepreneur, I have so many ideas constantly that losing one idea or losing one app isn't going to be that big of a deal for me in the long term. So what do you do in the case where you think it's just the one idea you have and you think it's the one thing you can only bet on, you only have the time for that one thing? What do you do in that case? Well, you really got to take a hard look at what you're doing from a business standpoint. I think from a developer's perspective, especially as one who started an entrepreneurial journey very early on, it's really easy to just build and hope that it pans out. But you need to understand that business side of things too. You need to understand how much is this going to cost you? And a lot of people think, when I ask them that question, is how much money is it going to cost? And they'll say stuff like, I'm still working, I could just work on the side. And that's not what I mean. I mean, what is it going to cost you financially, physically, and emotionally? And I'm certain there's other things we can add to that list, but for sake of argument, let's say it's those 3 things. Yeah, in terms of money, you might not be spending a whole lot. We could argue that, and that's probably fine. But what about time? Are you willing to sacrifice some of that free time in the hopes that that app will pan out? What if that time is better spent doing something else? What if that time is better spent on doing something like a hobby, or spending time learning a new skill, or updating something else? Like, is it worth that time? And what about your emotions? Are you willing to let your emotional state get to a point where it may be bad? I'll tell you this, from my personal experience, there were several times where I would work very late, that this project TrueStar would actually pan out, and that it would make a ton of money, and that I'd be able to do a lot with it. And it obviously didn't. It failed, but it was that time worth it? For me, it was totally worth learning, because every skill and everything that I learned from building that app, I was able to use in creating new apps into the future, and then eventually launching Camp Software. For others, it might not have been. Like, you just got to be willing to ask yourself, are you willing to make those sacrifices knowing that it may not pan out? I can't remember the stat, but a significant number of startups fail. And so someone who builds something needs to understand from day one that it has a very good likelihood of failing. It's the same reason why I don't do anything for pure equity anymore. If somebody wants to hire me and they want to offer me equity, I'm totally for it, but there has to be some sort of financial compensation behind it. Because if that app does fail, then I've lost a ton of time and a lot of money. So when do you call it quits? When is the right time? I think only you can really answer that question. I think you really have to sit there, meditate, and then ponder upon it and think, is this something that is worth continuing? If you were to continue that app for a year from now, would you actually be happy with the possibility of it either being better or worse? Remembering that there's a good likelihood that you will spend that next year losing it. Now, I heard something very cool the other day that I think will hopefully bring a little bit of hope, because I feel like I've been a bit pessimistic the last few minutes. But somebody mentioned and said, if the money is flowing in, if people are actually flocking to use your app or your idea, don't give up on it. Keep going. And I think that's when you know when you should continue moving forward. So again, perfect example. It's called OnKey Music Player. I've mentioned it before. But this app, when I first built it out, had almost 0 users. When I rewrote it using the new stuff that people had given me as feedback, I started to get subscribers. And so it would have been very easy for me, and it kind of is still easy sometimes for me to say, I'm just going to abandon it and leave it alone. But because I get subscribers every few weeks, it's easy for me to say, let me just go ahead and stick out with it for a little bit more because I know that there's promise in this. Maybe I need to add another feature. Maybe I need to fix a bug. Maybe I need to do something. Maybe it just requires me to do more marketing and I just don't understand that yet. And that one little step gets me to the next door. I personally am of the belief that if you are making money via your apps, that it's not worth shutting down. If your app is not making any money and you're putting more money into the application than it's generating revenue for you, it's time to abandon it. But that doesn't mean you should just give up hope when you think there's still promise in it. Maybe you have another lifeline. Maybe you're able to find a farmer's market, or maybe you finally find a subreddit that tells you exactly what you need to hear, or maybe you finally find a group of people in your community that it really helps out with, or somebody online that can really help you with it. And I think from my perspective, if I'm going to give anybody a piece of advice, is if you are bleeding money into this app idea and you have no extra revenue coming and you can't find an avenue for additional money to come into it, it's time to jump ship and move on to something else, as sad as it may be. But on the other hand, if you are making money, if you are starting to see it grow and you're seeing small gains month after month, then it's worth moving on a little bit forward until you have a better idea of whether or not it's going to be something that's going to play out long term. Remember, the goal of a business is to make money. And a lot of times, especially a lot of the app developers and SaaS business owners that I meet, their goal is to be able to replace their entire 9-to-5 job with this app idea. And I'm totally for it. I think it's awesome and I think they should totally do it. But you also need to recognize that it's a risk, and you need to recognize that there is a point where you're going to need to stop, and you're going to have to be okay with that decision. So prepare yourself, make yourself feel comfortable as you start to learn the ins and outs of your personal business and understanding things like your competitors as well. You'll have an even better understanding too of what exactly you should know. And so I really hope that you take this information back to whatever you're building and really consider, what is it you're building? Who are you really helping? Why do you want to do this? How are you planning on doing this? How long can you sustain that for? And if it's something that is worth continuing to pursue, do it. I'm not going to stop you, and no, neither should anybody else. No one should really stop you from your idea. But again, you should be cautious with it and understand that at some point you might need to actually stop building your application and you might need to move on to something else, and that's okay. And as always, if you'd like to hear more about me or hire me for my services, you're welcome to go ahead and hit me up on campsoftwarellc.com. I love helping people out with any technical and business stuff, especially with mobile app needs. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave them below, and I'll try to respond to as many as I can.